pursuing happiness. You're doing all right. When... The other guy's around and he means business, so get going. Remember, you're off base. You've just got time to save yourself. Drop whatever you're doing. Find the nearest hole and make like a mole. Pick a room in a good building, close to the ground. It ought to be airtight and light-proof as possible, with the doors shut, windows closed.
It's a bomb. Duck and cover. Duck and cover. Duck and cover. That's the first thing to do.
If you saw it advancing on you a mile away, you'd have about 30 seconds to take cover. Make for the nearest entrance, but be orderly about it.
If you are at home when a surprise attack occurs, crawl beneath a table if it is very near, or drop to the floor with your back to the window.
That fog has contaminated everything it touched with radioactive matter, which we'll call hot stuff, although it hasn't anything to do with its temperature.
After many generations lived under the fear of a nuclear war, it took only a few images from New York on September 11 to awaken in the American population some familiar ghosts, and to bring psychologically to its knees a nation that had never experienced an attack on its territory before. Confused between the fear of an unknown enemy and an ill-repressed thirst for revenge, Americans flatly accepted a war, the invasion of Afghanistan, that had already been planned to the smallest detail.
Our grief has turned to anger, and anger to resolution. Whether we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done.
Who really wanted the New York and Washington attacks? Who was truly responsible? The United States immediately accused Osama bin Laden, although they never produced the evidence they claimed to have against him. Nor did anyone express any particular surprise about the lack of a true motive on the part of bin Laden himself. It was as if the entire world was ready to accept that he was the evildoer just by someone pointing the finger at him. Everyone seems satisfied with the idea that bin Laden allegedly hated our civilization. This, however, is clearly at odds with the fact that he has never actually claimed responsibility for the attacks. The first thing every terrorist in the world has ever been concerned with was to put forward some kind of statement clearly explaining the reasons behind their act. Bin Laden, instead, a few days after the attacks, clearly stated that he had nothing to do with them at all. Only 3 months later would the CIA find a home video in Afghanistan in which bin Laden implies to have had pre-knowledge of the events while talking to a Saudi friend. The images, however, are so poor the video ended up posing more questions than it ever answered. To a closer examination, the man's features only resemble those of bin Laden. but the identity of the person can be anything but certain. In any case, a talk with a friend on a questionable videotape is not an official claim. The world is filled with psychopaths who accuse themselves of crimes they never committed, but without a good motive, they seldom even manage to get arrested. In 2006, the FBI stated that they never had any hard evidence against bin Laden, which contradicted the initial claims by the administration. The Bureau's website lists bin Laden as wanted for the bombings of the American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, but he is only suspected of other terrorist activities in the world. Officially, Osama bin Laden has never been wanted for the September 11 attacks.
It's a new age of wickedness.
Popular journalist and radio host Alex Jones, who has been pointing the finger at the U.S. administration since the beginning, had foreseen the attacks 1 month before they took place, and exactly by the hand of bin Laden. This recording is from July 25th, 2001.
And I want you to let them know that if there is any terrorism, we know who to blame. If any terrorism comes, it's from this government. And if there was an outside threat like a bin Laden who was a known CIA asset in the 80s, he's the boogeyman they need.
19 hijackers of the planes had crashed into the World Trade Center towers, into the Pentagon, and into the rural area in Pennsylvania.
Seen from up close, the official version soon started to show some serious weaknesses. Too many curious events, too many inconsistencies, too many coincidences pointed at the possibility that the truth had been somewhat different from what we had been told. This set off an unprecedented investigation on the internet. Thousands of independent researchers from all over the world ended up bringing to light so many faults in the official version that it legitimized suspicion that the U.S. administration had some kind of role in the attacks. From flight amateurs who perform highly acrobatic maneuvers without ever having piloted a jet in their life, to passports, personal wills, and terrorists' bandanas conveniently emerging from a hole where the plane cannot be found. From an entire Boeing 757 disappearing in a 15-foot wide hole, to modern steel buildings collapsing against the most fundamental laws of physics, it has become very difficult today to maintain that the official version reflects what truly happened on that day. In fact, in 2006, almost half of Americans believe that the Bush administration covered up the truth about 9/11. And the protests of those requesting a new, truly independent investigation keep increasing by the day. The more evidence that is gathered towards an inside job, however, the more it seems that it was not the work of the American government, but of a small group of people, the so-called neocons, or neoconservatives, who came to power with the election of George W. Bush in the year 2000.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully...
These are some of the founders of the so-called PNAC, or Project for the New American Century. Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, whose political alliance dates back some 30 years ago.
In my opinion, treason. The cabal of neoconservatives at PNAC, I think you all know what that is, who planned this war, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Libby, Pearl. This cabal knew the American people would not stand for a war against Iraq unless there was, as they put it in their own document, a new Pearl Harbor. 9/11 supplied that.
According to this theory, President Bush was not part of the original project, which coincidentally happened when he was out of town.